would you like to grab your beverage?
No, it's all right. It's just water. Oh, okay. Stay hydrated. Thank you.
I predicted this. Like in my graphic that I created, it was I had a beer and the guest had a drink of water. So yes, this is welcome Pat Brown.
Hello. Thanks.
So starting with the same first question, when was your first CocoaHeads?
I'm not too sure. Was it 2 years ago? Maybe. I'm not sure if it was a CocoaHeads or it was the annual meeting. Was it the annual meeting?
It was the annual meeting.
Yeah. So I wanted to come to a hack night, and because I was learning how to code.
Yeah.
And then the first event that was on was the annual meeting, and then they voted for who was going to be on the committee, and
and no one wrote any code.
And I was there, and I just said yes, and then the CocoaHeads after that I think was at the up here that I came to, which would have been like the week after maybe, and then but yeah, it was only like a year or two ago, maybe. I'm bad with dates, so any date I say, go back a year or forward a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you joined about 1 to 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's going to be at most 2.5 years ago because I only got a MacBook like 2.5 years ago.
Nice.
So it's not going to be before that.
So you rocked up thinking you were going to join a hack night, write some code.
Well, I knew it wasn't the hack night, but I thought it was still a meeting. No, I thought it was still a meetup.
Yeah.
And then it was the IBA office.
The volunteers organiser.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I misread that.
Yeah.
It was a great first meetup there.
It sounds horrible, actually.
That was all right. Good venue.
Yeah. Well done to have gotten thrown into.
It was intimate, you know.
Yeah. Oh, it would have been. And you somehow got lobbed into joining the committee.
Yeah, but
so you're just awkwardly standing there, and someone said,
"Oh, yeah, but." Oh, I don't know. I can't remember. It was ages ago. I just said yes.
Nice.
So it was good fun.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay. So what do you do for jobby job at the moment?
Well, I'm a software developer, junior developer at Itty Bitty Apps.
Nice.
So I got the job through CocoaHeads, kind of like meeting Sean and if I go on a tangent, just either raise your hand or
If you go on a tangent, I'll be very grateful.
Okay.
Continue.
and also,
yes,
because no, you're doing this thing. Sorry, I'm an idiot.
No, you need to complete that.
No, I was gonna say I might if I start not answering, if I'm not answering your question, and completely forget about it. Yeah, you can feel free to re-ask the question.
Yeah, I will.
Okay.
If I care about the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't. What was the question I was answering just there?
What do you do for a jobby job?
Okay, software developer at Itty Bitty Apps.
Nice.
Oh, iOS developer.
There we go.
Okay.
So software developer at Itty Bitty Apps.
Yes.
Right.
For about just under 6 months.
6 months.
Yeah.
So what were you doing in between the CocoaHeads meetup that you met the community and joining Itty Bitty Apps?
Learning how to be a software developer.
Learning how to be a software developer.
Yeah.
Okay.
I used to do system administration and solution architecture and business analyst stuff.
Yep.
And then I got an opportunity to just take time off, and at that point I realized I like software, I like iOS programming, and so I just said I'm going to focus on this for a couple of years. So I went out and bought the MacBook, and the rest is history.
And you dug in. Yeah. So you're doing system administration, business analysts, and you somehow discover that you enjoy iOS programming.
Yes.
How do you make that leap?
Okay. I'll keep this concise. When I was a kid, I loved programming, didn't know how to do it.
Right.
And this is the story, I think, where we kind of started the other day. And I was always trying to learn how to code Python, and I'd look at a tutorial. You might be able to relate to this, but it would always tell me to open up Notepad and start writing the code. And I would always not be able to, I'd get a tab, an indentation error and stuff, and I'd get frustrated and give up. This was when I was a kid.
Yep.
So I thought, I'm never going to be able to program. But growing up, I loved computers. I loved breaking things and fixing things.
Mm-hmm.
And I also tended to say yes a lot of times when people asked me for help, just fixing printers and fixing stuff. And I just become known as the kid that fixes things, right?
Yep.
So, and I worked at a news agency, so I got like met a lot of people, and word spread in the community to ask Pat for help. And then I still didn't know how to program, and then I ended up buying the news agency. Like, sort of, I took it over as a business, and I kind of focused on running businesses and stuff.
Yep.
And at the same time, I went to uni to get a business degree, thinking I'd make it official.
Right.
And when I finished my business degree, one of my friends was finishing up at an IT, sort of a like IT service provider or whatever it is, a managed service provider. And he goes, "Oh, you'd probably be good at this. Do you want to go for a job?" And I'm like, "Oh." And at that point, like, I was sort of, the business was kind of running, and like it ended up being like, it was a family business. I started there originally, and then like by that stage, Dad was running things, which we have different sort of points of view when it comes to customer service and stuff. Anyway, I wanted a change, so I'm like, yeah, I'll go for this job, which was in IT. And then, like, within the first week, I was out on a client site doing stuff with Windows Server. I didn't know what Windows Server was, but I'm like, oh, this is actually fun. This is what I do at home anyway, just mess with things, right? And I'm like, people are getting paid to do this. So I thought it was fantastic. Anyway, what I did is, one of the senior guys had to go to install, I can't remember the question, but I'm sure it was something. But one of the senior guys wanted to install a backup server or something like that. So all I had to do was he just wanted someone to help him lift something into the server rack. And
the ask was like physically
physically lifted.
Physically lift.
I was a level 1 system administrator when I started.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, just say yes to things, really give it your all. Because because up until that point, I hadn't actually had a job before that I felt like, because I had worked for myself a lot. And I also did web development when I was a kid, just freelance, but I was always using like templates and stuff, so I never felt like I actually knew what I was doing.
Yeah.
But so I'm doing this IT thing, saying yes. Went to this place. They had their own system administrator, like their in-house guy. And when I went into to just help install the server, I'm speaking to the employees, and they're just all upset that they can't scan to email anymore. And I'm like, I'm just asking around, like, yeah, the guy's been trying to fix it for 3 months. And I'm like, oh, here's a challenge. And then, so I fixed it that day. And then everyone's like, oh my God, that kid's fixed the scan to email thing.
Yeah.
And then that company ended up speaking to my company saying, we want that guy working for us, like as in just consulting out or whatever. And so they ended up, like, the next week I was out there, they got rid of their internal guy. And they sort of, then I became,
they got rid of
it was actually really weird. They had to lock out the systems, and we had to sort of get passwords and stuff like that. We didn't have access to everything. It was kind of fun. I'm like, this is interesting I'm 2 weeks in. And anyway, so it was a construction place with like 250 employees.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know what I was doing, but I didn't like to let people down.
Yep.
So I would always try to do my best. And over time, I had no benchmark. I had no sort of, I guess, way to calibrate what normal sort of work was. I didn't know what the normal effort was. I just thought, because I'm not very good, this is all very, like, I'm putting in a lot of hours. I'm doing this stuff. But over time, because I was basically running a place by myself, I called up the senior guy that helped me once, and he got angry with me. And I'm like, I'm never calling this guy again. Yep. Like, I just felt, because I'm like, oh, I'm asking for help. And then anyway, so he sort of gave me some attitude, some sass. And I'm like, all right, I'll just do it by myself then. And so then I was out, at this client site. I was doing like a bunch of stuff, and I got a lot of experience quickly, and it was really good. But as a company, we also did software development.
Yep.
So I was out on a client site, and then eventually I ended up, I was in the office and stuff, but one time I was just hanging out with the developers, and I saw them doing something on the screen. I'm like, what's that? And they were in IDE, which I didn't know what it was.
Oh, not Notepad.
Yeah, so that's like, I'm used to seeing code in Notepad, and I saw this guy run just a line of code to test it. I'm like, that's fantastic. And then he showed me some stuff, and I realized I could, with the system administration stuff, there's PowerShell, which is a language, and I had done other stuff with like batch scripts and stuff like that. But I started to use like more, advanced tools that for my work, and I did a lot of automation stuff, and that's kind of what led me to kind of, even though I wasn't really programming, it was just automation. But eventually it kind of like, it's sort of just like step by step, I started to, anything that I was doing, like that I had a process and plan for, I just convert to some sort of automated flow, and it basically helped me do the work that I was doing, which meant I could spend more time speaking to the employees. And because I realized that if I speak to people and they like me as a person, I don't have to be as good at my job. Like as in I try to be the best that I can be, right? But at the end of the day, this guy could have been the best in the world, but he put a sign up on his chair that said, between 11 a.m. and 12 p.m. or whatever is quiet time, don't interrupt me. I'm like, don't do that. Like, that's not, good. Even though he's thinking he gets to focus and fix. I'm like, man, these people just want to feel listened to, right? And you actually learn heaps too. It's like something that someone could be doing that takes them a bunch of time. Just by spending some time with them and listening to them, you can actually save them, like just by showing them how to do something differently that they've been doing and not realizing. It's like, I think, there were so many examples where I'd be watching the accounting ladies do something and I'm like, oh, you can just sort of push that button and then it does all this for you in Excel or whatever. They're like, oh my God, and it's like, if you were just sort of fixing the things that you were asked to fix and not sort of listening to people, you miss those opportunities to save people time and then they're happier about their job. That's kind of what motivates me to do things, right? But anyway, we ended up, skip forward a bit because I've realized I've talked too long, but we ended up, I ended up doing solution architecture and business and analyst stuff for clients. And we had a client come in that we got involved in blockchain and cryptocurrency. Yep. And one of the clients came in and asked, and so I as a kid, I liked gambling. Like I liked playing poker online. Okay. And there's a guy that I used to watch online, the guy called Tony G. If people watch poker, they might know who he is. But he was in the office one time. And I'm like, oh my God, does anyone know who that is? And then no one knew who he was. And I'm like, oh, okay, just me then. And then I'm trying to play it cool. And I told my boss that, I'm like, oh, that's Tony G. And so he sort of made it obvious that I was a fan. And I'm like, well, you've just stuffed that up for me. But anyway, so what he wanted help with was trading, like cryptocurrency trading. And because I was starting an ICO and stuff, and I had experience trading when I was a kid, just because one of the guys that come into the news agency was a stockbroker and stuff, and so he taught me stuff. And anyway, so I jumped on that project, and he wanted, he was doing trading, but because I was using PowerShell and automating stuff, I'm like, I could probably automate some of this trading stuff. Yep. And I ended up doing that. So I'd work during the day, and at night I'd sort of work on these bot things. And
PowerShell bots.
Actually, I started using JavaScript. Okay. So the reason I started using JavaScript is because I thought one day I always wanted to be able to make an app, or like someone comes to you with a cool idea, like a friend or family or whatever. Yep. And I was like, I want to be able to build that thing, solve that problem for them. But yeah, I never thought I'd be able to when I was younger. And I'm like, if I learn JavaScript, I might be able to learn React and React Native, which could lead me into learning how to make an app. Because I had also made like fake apps, like with those, I think Marvel and like a bunch of, because we'd do MVPs for clients, and I'd sort of I'd use Figma and that, and I'd sort of make something that looked like an app, but wasn't an app, like I'd get it working. And then half the time we'd spend like in meetings that would take ages trying to plan this thing out. I'm like, if we all just sat here and started building the thing, it'd probably be done by now. We've had so many meetings talking about what it could be, it would be done. And then I'm like, all right, well, let's, if I learn JavaScript, I can maybe one day code. And also with trading bots, a lot of people use Python. Like that was the thing. I'm like, that's not going to help me too much. I'll learn JavaScript. And so I started doing this thing. Some was in PowerShell because I had to get some stuff done. But like eventually I just started using JavaScript. I got VS Code, which has changed my life. It was incredible. And then, so at night I would build these bots. He lived in Lithuania and he was sort of traveling Europe and stuff. So his daytime would be sort of my nighttime, and we did a bunch of stuff. Anyway, it sort of all led up to a point where we were doing a conference in New York as like the company I was working at, we were doing like a blockchain. There was a big blockchain conference there. Anyway, it was also, Tony was going to be in New York as well. And it was like the first time we got to actually meet up in person since I started trading for him. So it was like a bit of a milestone celebration thing. Anyway, we sort of caught up. Things were good trading wise for him. And then from there, kind of, we went from New York to Vegas, and then I went to Lithuania because I booked 2 weeks off work just because I'm like, oh, I'm going to New York. I might as well spend a bit of time in New York. And then, so I'm like, I had time off. He wanted to sort of celebrate in Vegas. So we went to Vegas. We took a jet from New York to Vegas. And,
as you do.
Well, it was all very surreal at the time, right? Because
sure.
I was just a dude not trying to learn how to program on my laptop. I accidentally washed all my stuff before we went to Vegas and fell asleep, and it got left in the dry cleaner. So when we got up in the morning, I had no clothes. I went to like H&M or something, and then rocked up to his hotel. I'm just in track pants and a t-shirt and stuff, and I've got a H&M bag. I'm standing next to all these guys in suits and, their suitcases and stuff. And they're like, who's this dude in track pants? But then, because Tony we had a good relationship or whatever, Tony's like, they're like, why does Tony give a shit about that guy? And then I just became a sort of like his sort of like, he'd asked me advice for some of his businesses and stuff, and we built a relationship from there. And eventually that sort of become my sort of full-time thing, trading and sort of helping him. And sort of I ended up, because I was doing incident management and stuff at work, and I just become like, I tried very hard to justify staying at the business, but I'm like, it's just, it's more fun doing what I'm doing here. And then over time though, I realized I didn't like the trading as much, like as in the money from it. I liked the actual programming, like solving the problems.
Yep.
And then what happened during that whole COVID thing, we were trading, and I remember, because we'd sort of bet against the market and stuff, and we picked, when things were getting bad, we sort of picked a time where we bet heavy against the market. And it was just before Trump announced that they were closing travel from Europe. And it was like I remember it really well, because I was like, it was bittersweet, because we made a bunch of money, but then I had dinner with my old man that night, and he was sort of upset because his superannuation had sort of like gone down. I'm like, this is shitty. I'm like, how can I be happy when people around me are worse off? Because it just wasn't, I didn't like that sort of thing. And it was sort of long hours and stuff like that, because the markets didn't really close. I'm just like, I need a change. I need to stop what I'm doing and sort of pull out of, it took a bit of time to sort of get everything out. But I'm like, I just want to focus on programming. That's when I sort of bought the laptop.
Yep.
Kind of. And at that stage as well, and actually I hadn't bought the laptop yet, but a lot of the things that I was making for the trading bots, I'm like, I could probably open source this, right?
Yep.
Like, I'll just clean this up. And I thought, at this stage as well, I'm like, I'll try to learn how to program like properly, like follow a course. And I watched like a data, what was it? It was algorithms and, data structures or something course. And I learned like a lot of the stuff that I built myself with these bots. I started to make connections. I'm like, because I built a thing like to connect to multiple exchanges, at once or whatever, or across different network connections and stuff. And I called it like proxy something or whatever it was. But then I'm going through and I learned about a thing called a queue and a priority queue or whatever. I'm like, that's very similar to what I'm doing here. And then I learned that priority queues were how they used like to make GPS coordinates and stuff to make the shortest path. I'm like, that's fascinating. It just blew my mind that I started to sort of see these connections. I'm like, okay, I can clean this proxy thing up and make it a priority queue that is just generic and people can use, because like it gave me something to work on that actually solves a problem or whatever. There were others out there, but I'm like, it will give me an opportunity to build something that is publicly presentable. Mm-hmm. And so I worked on that for ages. And initially I was just like, make it nice. But then I started checking performance stuff. And like, I've made it like, so it's clean sort of in that sense, like it's understandable. But I kind of want to make it fast now compared to the others. And because I'd had experience troubleshooting and stuff and digging into problems deeply when I was a system admin, I sort of took that to another level and made it like the quickest publicly available. Well, at the time that I tested it, it was like the quickest thinger. But then after that, I'm like, I needed something else. And I did. This is such a long answer to a question. I apologize.
Can't remember what the question was.
Yeah, no. But there was a point where I did an interview at Afterpay. One of my friends organized an interview at Afterpay. I'm like, I don't know Java or anything like that, but it was a Java interview. And they said, you can do it in Java or Kotlin. I'm like, I know JavaScript. And then, so I spent 6 days learning Java. And I'm like, I'll learn Java first because that one came before Kotlin. Yep. So I'm like, I'll do that. And I'm like, oh, this is actually all right. Sort of a lot of frustrations I had with JavaScript Java was a bit weird, actually. I did the thing the next day. Like, I spent 6 days learning the language, 1 day to do the actual exercise. And then they took a bit of time to get back to me. And in the interim, I learned Kotlin because I'm like, I'll just redo it in Kotlin for my own benefit. And I'm like, oh, Kotlin's fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm like, this blew my mind. I'm like, any sort of problem I had with JavaScript or whatever, or like, because I was learning TypeScript as well, sort of, I used that. I'm like, a lot of the issues that I was having, I'm like, this is so smart. So it actually, that's the sort of thing that made me realize maybe I can learn Swift. I'm like, Java and Kotlin, not Java, but Kotlin was like, all right, this makes sense to me. I'm like, so that's when after that, I was like, no, I'm just going to stick to iOS development. And I thought if I keep it narrow focused, then it will be best for me. and then the rest is history.
The rest is history.
So yeah, sorry for a long answer. But
no. That's
so the question was,
I'm not going to recap that.
Don't try. I knew I wanted to say that I learned Kotlin. That made me like
Kotlin. You touched. Yeah. You learned JavaScript. You went into the thing. Java had the same term as JavaScript, so you went down the path of learning Java. You then tried to learn for yourself Kotlin. You went, right, this is way better. And you realized that
because I was doing React Native as well.
Yep.
And so I was trying to work with the camera, like the scanner. Yep. And I was using there's some thing that you download like from framework or something for React Native thing just to like get it running quickly.
Yep.
But you didn't have much control over the camera and the barcode scanning and stuff. And that was the sort of thing that I'm like, all right, well, I was pulling my hair out trying to get this working with React Native.
Yep.
I'm like, if I just build the whole thing, because I was building something for like an Australia Post delivery app thing, just because the place I was at could use it. And then I was like, all right, well, if I just rebuild this thing in Swift UI, and Swift UI was new to me as well. So it was like, I'm like, I'll just learn Swift UI. UI kit I didn't like too much. And because I was like, I had learned React Native as well in that time. So Swift UI made more sense to me. And it was just sort of fun, as new stuff was coming out, I get to test it out. Yeah. So yeah.
Nice.
Any more questions? There's other stuff I want to talk about, but we've been through a lot. Sorry.
No, there's so much stuff that I wanted to expand on later.
I'm going to set my answers to 30 seconds or a minute.
I think we're getting pretty close to overtime anyway. So you believe that you're now capable of doing iOS development. You pick up Xcode. You start writing some Swift UI. Now is this... Obviously, you're not doing this at the time that you've already started the job at Itty Bitty Apps or you've joined the CocoaHeads meetup. How do you orient yourself or introduce yourself to iOS development? Like, what are your online
as in my learning path?
Yeah. Short answer.
There's that 100 Days of Swift thing or whatever. Or
Paul Hudson's.
Yeah. Yep. There's the Stanford one.
Yeah.
There was a thing called Retro Rampage, which is a UI kit thing that I decided, it's like a clone of Wolfenstein. I decided to build it in Swift UI because it was the tutorials in UI kit. And I thought if I build it in Swift UI, it will give me some, like, it'll make it a bit challenging.
That make you sad instead, or?
What was that?
Did that make you sad instead, trying to achieve that in SwiftUI, or
No,
it worked?
No, it was all right.
Okay,
yeah,
nice.
It was fine. It was good. And then the Point Free video series, which I signed up for, that was a pinnacle moment for me.
Right. So the Point Free video series, you follow that course.
Well, yeah, I started watching the videos, and a lot of that resonated with me.
Yep.
And because they really were methodical about explaining stuff and sort of breaking it down to understandable chunks, and just sort of, I got to see someone else code, which I never got to really program with anyone as well. That's why I was coming to the Hack Night, or wanted to come to the Hack Night.
Yep.
And but yeah, so then I reached out to them and said, is there a place that people talk about this? And the guy's like, oh, there's the forum or whatever, one of the presenters, Brandon. And he goes, I could invite you to a Slack group that's iOS folks or whatever, which is a invitational Slack group or something like that. And it had a lot of people from like overseas, like California and stuff, and working at these companies, and they would post problems and I would just start solving them for people, because I'm like, I was doing my own thing, but as a break, it was cool to see other problems people were having. And then I just did that, and like sort of as a spare thing that helped me learn a lot too, because I'm like, oh, there's these challenging things people are having in real world situations, and that helped me learn.
Nice. Kept it short.
I tried.
Nice. I know now that like you've contributed quite a lot to Point Free repo. In the interest of time, I might wrap it up kind of there. One question though, do you have any advice for someone else who's kind of getting started into iOS development? Any kind of tip for them who's getting started into iOS development or programming in general?
Find a project or a problem that you're interested in solving, and sort of just build something that can solve that problem.
Nice. Solid advice. Cheers. Thank you very much for your time today, Pat.
Thank you.